Greetings, ladies and gentlemen and students, and welcome to the Library of Monsters. Today's book is going to be a very special episode. This will be a kaiju theory video. Now, we have a ton of information and facts to lay down in this video, so let's cut out the rest of the intros and get straight into this beast of a hypothesis of mine. My proposed theory in this book is, as the title of the video alludes to, it's about a common thread of kaiju ancestry that might exist. The monsters Gurunga, Gabora, Narunga, Pagos, Magular, GMK Baragon, and C Baragon, I believe, are all in one way or another biologically related to the fearsome and elusive kaiju known as a Baragon, the floppy-eared chicken-eating dinosaur that tunneled beneath the earth. His kind is the head of this unique family tree of intertwining species, and personally, he is my favorite monster from the Godzilla series. I mean, he is really damn adorable with those ears. Besides that fact, let us look at this theoretical family tree for old Baragon here. As you can see, I've kept the GMK Baragon and C Baragon off to their own little area here on the tree, mainly because their explanations of how they came into existence is not nearly as difficult to explain. The other 5, however, will take up a big chunk of this video. Because to understand them, we're going to have to look at a whole wide range of proofing points to back several different aspects of this theory. Because in the end, all this video will be is just a fan discussing things. A kaiju theory that ultimately is just a theory. There will be no absolute 100% proof that any of this is actually what happened to these monsters. You would have to get that word from Toho or Tatsuburaya on that. And I seriously doubt they would want to do that. They are pretty busy companies after all. So before we settle into this, I want to make things perfectly clear. What I'll be proposing is my own personal beliefs, something that I've crafted for myself, and that's just called an opinion, which by definition is a belief or judgment that rests on grounds is sufficient to produce complete certainty. You are free to agree with me or disagree. It's perfectly fine either way. Just don't get so worked up with what I'm about to say. I'm just a fanboy that's trying to make sense of a bunch of monsters that are played by men in rubber suits, so just go along with the ride. Now with that out of the way, let's look exactly at who and what Baragon is first. Baragon, in his original film, is an ancient dinosaur that managed to survive the extinction of the thunder lizards. He adapted quickly and tunneled his way into the earth in order to escape the rapid cooling of the oncoming ice age. He quickly seeked the warmth of the earth, a heating element that would be able to sustain him in his extraordinarily long hibernation-like slumber that allowed him to survive to the mid-20th century. He was eventually awoken by an offshore oil rig. Most likely this drill had dunked down far enough to reach whatever tomb-like chamber that housed the mammoth reptile in his rest. Now, there is a lot more stuff that happens to him in his film, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, but honestly, this is all we really need to know. If you want to see his adventure, I really advise you to seek out the movie. It's a terrific piece of kaiju goodness that surpasses many of the mid-60s Godzilla films. So with that brief history, let us lay out some important facts about Baragon and his species. First, they're not mutant creatures. They are normal dinosaurs. And yes, I know they're larger than any known dinosaur and he breathes fire. Not to mention he could tunnel under the earth like Dig Dug on PCP. And to which I say to that, this is a Japanese movie. Real life logic has to be checked at the door. The movie says it's a normal dinosaur, so we'll go with that, even if it doesn't really make a whole lot of logical sense. Now, as I said, Baragon is a normal dinosaur. He is a quadruped monster with a very pudgy body. He can jump very well for his size, sort of like a frog, and as we said, he can breathe fire from his jaw. His back is aligned with overlapping plates, and his nose is adorned with a horn that can glow in the dark like a lightning bug's butt. His kind are voracious eaters, as he displayed in the film. They eat meat and they just love to do that. Humans, chickens, and even horses are not safe from this toothy kaiju. Now, these are all very important facts that need to be remembered, because we'll be coming back to these very soon. So let's put this board away for a little while as I talk about the, as I like to call them, the science and magic Baragons, the C and GMK versions. Like I said, explaining their relationship to the ancient dinosaur will not be nearly as difficult as the others. First, we have the science, the C Baragon, a creature that first and only appeared in the Godzilla manga series, Godzilla King of the Monsters. It is a pretty fantastical story of revived monsters, genetic engineering, and even time machines. The C Baragon is one of the revived monsters in the book. The evil Dr. Oniyama actually uses the corpse of the original Baragon that battled Frankenstein in '65. He decides to make the monster stronger by splicing its DNA with some marine mammals, a walrus and a narwhal whale to be more specific. Now, the creature is built for an underwater battle with the Big G himself, a battle he actually ends up losing. But, you're fighting Godzilla. What the hell do you think's gonna happen to you? So yeah, the Sea Baragon is just a genetic tampering of the original Baragon. Pretty easy to relate it to the underground lizard species. Now the Magic Brother, the GMK Baragon, is pretty much the same, but instead of DNA and science stuff, we have a creature that finds its life and power driven by souls. I know, it's very strange and really up to a whole wide range of interpretations in the film. In the movie, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Oh boy, that's a mouthful. In this film, the monsters are guardian spirits, and Godzilla is a beast that was created and powered by the atomic bomb and the souls of vengeful spirits that were lost in World War II. The Guardians are ancient monsters that were defeated hundreds of years ago. They were sealed away, awaiting for when they would be needed again. I personally believe that these monsters were just prehistoric animals that were able to survive to that time period, much like how the original Baragon did. Well, at least Baragon and Mothra. King Ghidorah is something else entirely that we will not touch upon in this video. Now, it is my belief that Baragon in this timeline was a normal Baragon that awoke in Japan's past. It was somehow defeated by the locals and sealed away. Obviously, since the movie does have a lot of magic and spirituality undertones, it can be assumed that those magics were the intangible energies that were used to lock the reptile away. It isn't too far-fetched to think that maybe the souls of the people that were lost in the battle with the monsters were used to create those fettered chains. It would explain the motes of light that surround the monsters when they die. Individual souls that were used to power the monsters, like how Godzilla was done in the movie. And it would explain the monster's incredible intelligence. Mothra actually punishes some Japanese youths who want to drown a puppy in a lake. She kills the teens and spares the dog, an act that shows that she understands the human definition of evil, a thought that she could absorb from the souls that bound her. Baragon seeked out Hirotoshi Isayama in order to free him from his police holding cell, an interesting act that just begs for human-like intelligence. He needed to free the old man so he could awaken King Ghidorah, a creature that was the most powerful of the three Guardians, the only one that could truly stand a chance of defeating the angry Godzilla. So yeah, another example of a Baragon that survived from the ancient times. When he awoke, he found himself bound and powered by magic and the human soul. Mind-boggling, but it's pretty easy to understand when you put it in that type of context. Now that we got those two guys out of the way, we can really start to dig into the rest of the meat of this video. As I said, Narunga, Garunga, Pagos, Magular, and Gabora have the possibility to be evolutions or mutations of other Baragons that survived from the time of the dinosaurs. I mean, this is Japan. A ton of dinosaurs have survived that cataclysmic event. If one managed to survive, then more than likely others could have too. First, let's look at all these monsters' physical appearances, abilities, and behavioral patterns, and see how they relate to our Toho champion. And by the way, I know all these monsters, except for Garunga of course, were actually created by modifying the original Baragon suit. That little fact only adds to the plausibility of this theory, though. Now, all these creatures are quadrupeds, meaning they walk around on all fours, or rather two front legs and knees, They also have the ability to rear up on their hind legs and actually walk around, not a common thing for a whole lot of other four-legged kaijus in the world. These monsters also have a very similar body build. Large, powerful forearms and curling back legs. Their bellies are overly large and pudgy, giving them an almost walrus-like look. All these creatures additionally are fantastic burrowers too, able to dig through the earth at amazing speed. They also have very similar back plates that run along their spines and tails. Some of these, like Pagos, Garunga, and Gabora, look almost identical to the Baragon armor. Narunga is pretty close, except he has that strange frill-like fin that runs down the center of the monster's spine. Magular is probably the furthest in change, but you can still see elements of the original plating around his back and sides, though it's not nearly as defined here because of the other added armor and spines that cover this decked-out monster. Most of these creatures also have a facial horn. They're all shaped differently, but they're there. Except for Gabora, he doesn't, which sort of makes some sense. Since the armor plating around his neck has to encase his head, it would be sort of difficult to do that if you had a horn there. Also, most of these monsters have a fire breath. They can emit sheets of different colored flames from their mouth. And, like the horn, there is a candidate here that breaks that mold. Narunga doesn't have any fire breath. Rather, he emits energy blasts from his nasal horn and antennas. Now, because Narunga doesn't have a fire breath, or Gabora doesn't have a nasal horn, that doesn't make them any less invalid to the overall group. Take the hairless cat and the Manx cat. These are the only two breeds of cat that don't have any hair or a tail. Now, by not possessing these two qualities, does that make them not a real household cat species? No, of course not. In every species of animals, there will always be the oddballs that stand out. Those cats stand out there, and Gabora and Narunga stand out a little bit here in this aspect. But those are the similar abilities and physical looks. These monsters also have a very similar behavioral pattern. They're bullish fighters that try to use their bulk and power to overcome their threats, ramming headlong into a fight. Most of the time, they're very voracious eaters, constantly having the need to feed. Though, because of their mutations, they don't all necessarily feed on meat anymore. Pagos and Gabora eat uranium, and Narunga eats electricity. Garunga, we can assume, still eats meat as well as Magular. I mean, look at him when he's watching the Red King and Chandler fight. He so looked like he wanted to run off with that ripped off arm for a little midnight stack. Jokes aside though, these are the numerous reasons that I believe these monsters are all related to Baragon. For the moment, let's just say that it's possible, maybe even correct. The next question though is how in the world did we get these different types of variations? How can one species of a dinosaur transform into several different looking monsters? And to that question, we have three possible answers to this part of the theory. Actually, it's really just two. The other one's almost impossible to happen because of game-breaking problems, but I would feel completely remiss if I didn't at least mention it a little bit. So let's do that here. Theory number one is the evolution theory, an idea that says that these monsters gradually evolve from a group of Baragons over time. Evolution is the genetic change in the inheritable traits of a biological population that happens over many successful generations of that particular species' life. And, just as that definition, thank you Wikipedia, we can rule this idea out of being a possibility to these monsters' origins. In order for this to work, you would have to have a sizable population of Baragons that are living underground, because you wouldn't want any genetic inbreeding to be happening. But in order to have such a large population that is carrying on generation after generation of lineage, you would need food, and that's the biggest problem to this. Baragons are hungry predators. They need to feed. There is no way there can be enough prey in the earth in order for them to sustain generations of youth. Baragon survived the age of the dinosaurs because of his ability to burrow. Brontosaurus, Triceratops, and other herbivore creatures didn't. It's just impossible for there to be enough food to last millions of years for this evolution theory. Sleeping in hibernation is the only way that these dinosaurs could have survived to the modern day, which means that only a single generation, or individual, is the only way that a Baragon can transform into these other monsters. And it's in that statement than which I base my other two solutions, mutation and evolution through mutation. Both of these hypotheses are very close in their ideas, so we'll cover them both at the same time. The mutation theory says that other Baragons survived by themselves in different parts beneath the earth. Coincidentally, all these parts underground were around Japan. Go figure, right? The creatures, most likely near adults, found a tomb-like expansion in which they slept and hibernated their life away. Now, we're not going to explain how this is possible. It could be any number of factors, but it's Japan. It's a Japanese movie or television show. Just go with that explanation that a monster could survive for huge amounts of times in hibernation. It just happens, okay? Now, why would I say that this is a mutation? Well, it's because Baragon itself probably nestled near a very powerful zeolite source. A source that over time caused his body to mutate over the millions of years that it slept. Thermal radiation, radioactive isotopes, unknown elements, really it's any number of robust energies that could have been there. Uranium, of course, would be for Pagos and Gabora, since they love to eat that type of stuff. Thermal radiation could be for Magular in his thick and blackened protective hide. Garunga could be a new element that is not yet discovered. I mean, we did have Element X in King Kong Escapes. And Narunga would be based on a combination of radioactive elements and natural earth batteries. Meaning a large deposit of copper and iron could have been near the dino, which would cause a telluric current to happen. A phenomenon of electrical currents that happen in the Earth's crust. This would explain his love for electricity. Now, the other hypothesis is almost exactly the same as this one, wherein as that one, it's adult Baragons mutated into the monsters. In this hypothesis, the evolution through mutation one, this says it's Baragon's eggs that grow and develop into these final monsters. In real life, outside factors have proven to have an effect on developing zygotes and developing fetuses. So in reality, this isn't really that far out there. The eggs lay dormant nearby an affecting energy source that mutates its malleable cells over millions of years, slowly evolving them into a new kaiju that benefits from their surroundings. Now, these are as good as any explanations for a family tree theory, but is it possible? At least, is it possible in the world of Japanese television shows and movies? Can an adult monster, or egg, survive millions of years in hibernation? Can a monster's egg or individual be mutated from outside forces of power, like radiation and such? And the answer to all this is, heck yeah, this is Japan, the king of giant monsters that have had their origins from all different types of walks of life. So with that, let's look at some examples to see if these outcomes are actually possible, and finally see if everything adds up to this kaiju-sized theory. Can an egg or dinosaur-like monster survive millions of years of hibernation? Yeah. There are tons of those that have happened over the decades. You have Gamera, Magma, the Deadly Mantis, and the Rainosaur. All these beasts rose up from their prehistoric tombs. And by the way, in this timeline, Gamera is supposed to be a normal monster, not the Atlantean biological counterweapon he was in the 90s. But it's not just the ice where these things dwell. Varan and Titanosaurus slept beneath the oceans and lakes of Japan. Neurogearus and Stegosaurus from Fireman, a series that has tons of dinosaur monsters, were also sleeping beneath the waves as well. By the way, Neurogearus, that guy is like the Jason Voorhees without a mask. Seriously, he murders 3 monsters in a single episode. Eesh. Anyway, Gudon, Burdon, and Yongari arose from their slumber in the grounds and volcanoes of the world. And all of these monsters, all of these beasts were just normal animals. No radiation or anything is used to give these monsters life. No matter how odd it seems that an oversized turtle and a lizard can actually eat fire, they were just ancient beasts that were trapped in the ground, snow, and oceans for millions of years. Now, for the eggs, we have a terrific example of these. You have the 2 Rodans from 1956 and the Rodan from 1993, as well as the Plesiosaur and Rhamphorhynchus from the Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. You also have Twintail and Leecher from Ultraman. All of these were normal monsters and dinosaurs that survived in their eggs for millions of years, tucked away from the world until humans decided to uncover them, where soon after they hatched and began to do a whole lot of destructive stuff. Well, except for Leecher. Gotta love that Phoenix bird and how she sacrifices her life to take out that Godzilla clone Gomez. So, surviving that long of a period shouldn't really be a problem for these Baragon-like monsters. So, let's look at the other half of that question. Can the adult or egg be mutated into a creature that is different from its original form? And again, this is a huge yes. I don't think I need a ton of examples of adult monsters being mutated by radiation, because we had the most universal monster for that. The Big G himself, the one and only Godzilla. A Godzillasaurus that is mutated by an atomic bomb into a nuclear death breath monster. I don't really think that there's any better example of that, but if you do want some more, I do have plenty. The giant ants from them, the locust from Begin and the End, and Ragon from Ultraman, all of these are monsters growing to enormous size from radiation. Heck, even the incredible Melting Man mutates from solar radiation, and the hideous Sun Demon mutates from a new radioactive isotope. It was the 50s and 60s, radiation was unknown to people, and they thought it could do just about anything. I honestly could go on forever with this list, but honestly guys, Godzilla. That's all I really need to say for an adult monster transforming into something different. Now for the eggs, we do have some variety here for examples. Now we can actually use the Rodans from 56 and 93 in this example as well. Their eggs survived millions of years, but they were mutated by being exposed to modern day archetypes of man's ignorance. More specifically, Rodan from 93 was mutated by nearby toxic waste, and the Rodans from 56 are theorized to be mutated by the modern day hydrogen bombs. But the fact remains, they were eggs that survived untainted for millions of years, until they got to the modern day and they were touched by man's ignorance. Another example, Baragon from Gamera vs. Baragon, was a creature that was mutated from an infrared lamp that was placed over his opal-like egg. The movie actually says that he's a mutation because he doesn't pay attention to a giant diamond. And, oh yeah, he kinda grows to full size in like half an hour instead of 10 years. One could even argue that Minya was a result of a mutation by radiation. When this happened, whether it was before the weather experiments or not, is really up for another theory for another time. But Minya shoots radioactive smoke rings, and he is a mutated Godzilla. And he was in his egg. So, you do the math. But yeah, there's tons of examples of monsters and eggs being mutated, and normal monsters and dinosaurs living for millions of years in hibernation. Couple all this with a very strong physical resemblance, abilities, and behavioral pattern for this group of four-legged monsters, and you got yourself a pretty potential and truthful kaiju theory. Now, I know this video is getting a little bit long, but before we wrap this up, I want to touch upon something that a very credible Godzilla website has posted up. Specifically, I'm talking about the Toho Kingdom. Great site, by the way, if you never checked it out. Now, they've been touching up their monster bios with some really great information and layouts. What struck me, though, is the fact that they claim that they were two different Baragons in the Showa era. One that shows up in Frankenstein vs. Baragon, and a second, smaller one that shows up in Destroy All Monsters. Now, they have a lot of different books to back this up, and honestly, it's a very plausible statement. I mean, there were two Godzillas, two Angruses, and even two Rodans in the original Showa series. But the kingdom also states that Baragon is a descendant to a dinosaur called, now get this, a Baranos dragon. Yeah, it's a play on words with Baragon's actual name, Bara meaning rose and Ragon meaning dragon. This information was most likely collected from the Godzilla of the game. You know, that PS4 game that sort of disappointed a whole lot of folks. Anyway, this is most likely Toho trying to retcon the character a little bit and make it a little bit more realistic, shall we say. That's really not that uncommon for a company to do that. Superman, Godzilla, and Sonic tend to do this a lot. But let's go with this information, that there were multiple Baragons in the original timeline, and that they were actual descendants from a Mesozoic era reptile. Wouldn't all that information make our theory that much more confirmed? We stated before that in order for all these monsters to exist, there would have to be multiple Baragons underground and dormant around Japan. Case in point, having two Baragons in the movie make that a confirmed statement. And we also said that mutation through outside forces could give rise to all these Baragon-esque like clones. If the Showa Baragon is a descendant of a normal dinosaur, then that proves that there has to be the potential to mutate and evolve. No predator dinosaur was as big as 82 feet in length. No normal animal could breathe a magma heat beam from his mouth. That is obviously a mutation that is happening, sort of like Godzilla. So by using this retcon information from the Toho Kingdom, it just proves that beyond a shadow of a doubt that these creatures could all be related to one another. Whether it be a normal dinosaur Baragon or a normal dinosaur Baranos dragon. But in the end, this theory is exactly just that, a theory. A statement that inherently has some subjectivity and personal opinion of beliefs. I think it might be correct and most certainly even plausible, but what I think is completely and ultimately irrelevant. It's up to you, the viewer, to choose whether you think that this is legitimate or not. Do you believe that there's some truth to this kaiju idea, or am I completely wrong? Did I get some things right, or did I completely miss the point? However you feel, make sure you write down in the comments down below. Tell me what you believe is happening here. But please remember, this is my opinion and only stated in fun. That's basically what this whole thing was about. It was just for fun, and just to enjoy the genre we know and love. No need to really take offense at anything said here. If you liked the video, give a thumbs up. And if you really liked the video, subscribe and tell some of your friends. If you agree with me or disagree with me, that is perfectly okay. But for now, this book is finished and the library is closed. Until next time, my friends, have fun, stay safe, and I'll catch you on that flip side.